Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Ingram Jones and I have with me a special guest, a legendary guest, Dave Duenas for Leave It in the Ring Boxing. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you for that introduction. I really appreciate that.
Listen, you are what they call retro, back in the day, old school. What really happened? I was like explaining to you earlier, it's like, and I'm not being kind of like, but it's like when you have your first kiss or your first, you know, that first experience. You're like, for me in YouTube, you're one of the first guys that I saw, and I'm not meaning that kind of funny way there, but you know what I mean. I'm a married man, right? But you know what I mean. Just,
I know what you mean.
That experience where you get into watching something and you get somebody who's commentating, talking about boxing experiences, and you sit back and you go, yeah, I'm going to tune into that person. I'll tune into them every time they've got a video. I tune in and listen to them. You were that guy. So yeah, of course, I time I see you, I say, man, Dave, got to talk to him. He's a wise old head about boxing. He's in the States. You know, he's a man that will speak the truth, speak his mind. He's got a wide range of views on a wide range of things within the sport. So hey, end of year review, who best to do it with than yourself?
Hey man, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, it's not the first time I've heard that. I'm the old school of the boxing commentating, or the godfather of the podcast for boxing. It's a true honor to hear that from people, especially the people that recognize the hard work that I had put in to kind of get. It's almost like an old boxing story, right? You root for the underdog, and I was the underdog when I came along in terms of talking about the sport of boxing. But because at the time in the internet, the only guys that were really being heard were the guys that had a website, like guys from Boxing Scene, Max Boxing, Fight Hype. They had their commentary, but it was articles. It really wasn't anything that we can kind of just as fans, unless you wanted to get on their forum boards and stuff, which I wasn't one of those kind of guys that got on the forums. I stood away from that. So when I saw YouTube for the very first time, I was like, wow, this is something different. This is another way of communicating with other fight fans that were just not in the same city or the same town, but obviously in the same, in a different state or across the country or across the pond. And it was a great way of communicating, and not just, I wouldn't say I had knowledge of the sport, but my knowledge grew fastly quick because of the other folks from around the world that had their set of opinions. And when we got into YouTube, it was about a thing of being open-minded. It wasn't about trying to outdo the other guy with subscribers and views and stuff. It was about really gathering information and talking about real topics that were on our shoulders that we had no other way to vent them out. So it was a beautiful way it was a great thing for myself and guys like Boxing for Real, Pound for Pound, Blood, After Dark Boxing, Midnight Boxing, David Chen, Strikeheart, guys like that, 91166, guys like that, for us to really come together and really start this, now what they call is the boxing community of YouTube.
So for those people who, which I normally do, is introduce the person first and say what they've done or who they are, and I've kind of skipped that bit. Just go back a little bit and tell people a little bit about what you've done, who you are, and what you've kind of achieved back then and to now, for example.
Well, I don't know. It varies off, I guess, with the same thing, like his opinions of what our opinions are of the sport of boxing, right? It can go the same way with other folks and stuff. What did I do? I honestly didn't do anything special. I don't feel like I ever did. What I was an addict to the sport of boxing, and I needed my fix. So what I did was I decided to go on YouTube, and the reason I got on YouTube, and I contribute this to my sister, my younger sister, because I had a friend by the name of Butch Collins who had passed away, which was my boxing he was like my boxing brother. And when he passed on, I really had no way of getting out fantasy matches or upcoming fights, nobody to debate with or to praise a certain fight that was about to happen with, right? So I just kind of got shelled up. My sister brought it along, and that's how I got into the YouTube boxing community, was posting videos. Now, what I changed about it was there was no other guy except for this one guy named Jose on Fire. I apologize for not remembering his last name. I think it was Aguirre or something, Jose Aguirre on Fire. And he was a guy in the East Coast, and he wasn't doing commentating or any type of one-on-one communication with fans. What he was doing was enlisting videos, boxing interviews, and putting them on YouTube. Well, I decided, hey, I want to do interviews. And it really kind of just fell on my lap. Sugar Shane Mosley's father, Jack Mosley, reached out to me and asked me to come down to his gym and do an interview with them. And then from there, it just kind of just caught like wildfire. I ended up doing like Antonio Margarito, Yorkis Gamboa, Amir Khan, when he had just arrived to the States. So that's what I kind of changed. And then still people weren't doing that. But then at the same time, there wasn't no, you could do YouTube, post something on YouTube, but you had a chance to edit things if you wanted to. So it wasn't really authentic, and I wanted something that was organic, something that was just new, something that nobody had really ever done. And the one thing that you learn as a blue collar worker, and I was a plumber for 24 years. If you did a long commute, the radio stations didn't provide they provided things of interest, but not in sports for me. And a lot of other boxing fanatics out there, they didn't have that radio that they can tune into and listen to on a long commute. Or if they were sitting down at work and they're working on their computer, they weren't able to tune something on and listen to a couple of folks talk boxing. So that's the next jump that I did, because I noticed that nobody was. And then the people that were doing it, it was very minor. It was more of a long commercial. Nobody was really putting interviews and or fighters that were going to face each other. Nobody was putting them on at the same time, rather than just a press call, a conference call, but put them on at the same time and allow them to debate each other of why they were going to win their upcoming fight. So I wanted to provide that, and I did that. And in the same time, like I said, being off of YouTube, nobody was trying to do a website. And I started that. I opened up my own website, which at the beginning was called There Will Be Blood. Then I changed it to Leaving the Ring when I started the boxing radio show. And then it's just history from there, I wanted to make sure when I did provide that podcast radio that it was going to be true news, stuff that you wouldn't be able to get from anywhere else. So that's when I started broadening my interest in trying to pull in real journalists to be involved with Leaving the Ring. And that's why nowadays you have, Gabriel Montoya, Felipe Leon, Brian Foggs, Steve Kim, and the list goes on and on. You've seen that track of different journalists joining Leaving the Ring.
Wow. You've done some tremendous work with Leave It in the Ring, some fantastic work, the podcast you've done there, and full credit has to be given to you for that. As you know, it's the end of 2015, so I thought to myself, who better to review 2015 than yourself? Before we begin, I just wanted to say this. I'm the new heavyweight champion of the world, Tyson Fury. I just wanted to say that. I know in America some people are like, yeah, he needs to beat Klitschko, and other people are like, nah, he ain't all that.
I don't.
So where are you with that?
I guess the guys that are saying that shouldn't have passed on to Tyson Fury, maybe don't watch enough of the heavyweight fights to understand that a Tyson Fury character is much needed in the heavyweight division. There's got to be somebody colorful, and he fits that genre. Whether you're going to love him or you're going to hate him. But, before I even give him the praise for Tyson Fury, because, I was really happy that he had won, I still got to give it to Vladimir Klitschko. This guy's an older warrior. How many years was he dominant? How many years that you could really put him on a pound for pound list, even above Floyd Mayweather? I mean, he was dominant and stopped every opponent that he faced, prior to his loss. But here was a guy that didn't need Tyson Fury. He could have sat onto it and retired, being the undisputed heavyweight champion. But it just shows you what type of real champion Vladimir Klitschko really is. Now timing is everything, and you can't beat Father Time. And we don't know. I think what most folks are wondering is, how good is Tyson Fury? Because Vladimir Klitschko, which was a big heavyweight with a very strong jab and a tremendous right hand, didn't show up and didn't show that display of greatness that we've seen in the past. So it leaves, what if Vladimir Klitschko was able to put his foot on that gas pedal, was able to really go for the gusto against Tyson Fury? Would we have seen the best Tyson Fury we've all been waiting for to see? Or would we have seen another guy that was groomed up a little too quick to face a world champion like Vladimir Klitschko? And I think those are the questions that people still kind of felt that there was left. They didn't really get a definition or a definite answer of who is Tyson Fury. And that's going to be left to Tyson Fury now and his legacy of chosen opponents that he's got to get himself involved with. And one of them obviously is the guy Deontay Wilder. Wilder too is a guy that has a lot of questions, more questions about who he is than Tyson Fury is at the moment. So I like the fact that Tyson Fury's got the title, because I have a huge feeling that just like most of the European fighters nowadays, they step up and they really face real hard oppositions. They do want to prove. They still have the mentality of, I want to be the greatest fighter of all times. Where the American fighters have really slipped into, I want to be the richest fighter of all times. Two different mindsets from two different countries. So you pick and choose. Some folks are not going to like the Tyson Fury thought of, I can kick anybody's ass, whoever's put in front of me. And some fans are always going to love that flamboyant style, guy that throws money in your face and has a bunch of strippers around you. I tend to like to lean over to the guy that dares to be great and doesn't mind picking up the mic and singing us tune here and there,
So going into the fight with Fury and Klitschko, what were your thoughts? What were your beliefs?
What do you mean? I'm sorry. Ask me that question again.
Well, what were your views? What did you think about? What did you consider before the fight was made, or coming up to the fight or the weigh-in? What was going through your mind?
Well, I thought timing. Like I said, I thought timing was there for. Well, like I said, I thought the timing was there for Tyson Fury. I mean, whoever got that next fight from Vladimir Klitschko after fighting Bryant Jennings, obviously had the opportunity to seize to take that title away from Vladimir Klitschko. It really depended on two things: the guy that was challenging for the title, what state of mind was he at, and was he ready to go for it? And number two, was Vladimir Klitschko done? And I think we saw a little of both. Okay, Tyson Fury went out there and he boxed. As big as he is, and as big and awkward that he looks, he boxed. He really didn't try to make his stay in the pocket with Vladimir Klitschko. He never really set his chin out there so it can be tagged. He made sure he boxed. And that's the one thing that a lot of folks sometimes, like, you get these really weird fans that praise Floyd Mayweather for boxing, but then when another guy does it, they're rubbish. They're no longer any good. These guys didn't fight for the title. You're supposed to beat the champion. You're supposed to do this, supposed to do that. It's always a double standard thing. So that's the weird thing about fight fans, So you can absolutely criticize Tyson Fury of how he boxed, how he set the pace, or you can actually look at it that he fought as a mature fighter. He didn't fight like a foolish amateur and try to just blow his gas load out there and try to knock out a champion that has been knocked out in 10 years or so, and take the chance of a right hand coming across and landing and hurting him. He didn't want to leave those margins to be filled with those type of scenarios. So instead, what he did was he did the most educational thing that a fighter is supposed to do, which is box. So Was I surprised he did that? Was I surprised in how disciplined he was? Absolutely. I was very surprised and how much, you know, I mean, it goes with anybody. It's like when you're intimidated by a job or something, right? An obstacle, and you go for it for the first time, and you tend to see that it's easy to do. You're like, wow, this is a lot more easier than what I thought, right? And you start becoming more comfortable that you start becoming careless, and then you end up slipping and falling, right? That's the norm. But with Tyson Fury, we kind of waited for that. That's what I was waiting for the comfort zone. When was he going to become comfortable to make that mistake, to make that margin to be filled by a Klitschko straight right hand to land and to get him dropped? So where we all can go back and say, well, he had a great game plan for the first 5 to 6 rounds, but he became overcomfortable with his stay. But he didn't. He stayed humble, realizing, yes, this is easy. But, you know, it's like that old saying, you know, you don't have to make work hard. You have to make it easy, right? But you don't have to make work hard. But at the same time, you don't have to make it look so easy. And that's what he saw. He had to work hard to get to that point. And it was easy to outpoint Klitschko, but it would be so hard on his career if he got knocked out by a mere mistake. And it was hard for him to stay in that position just to box and not leave that pocket. So you got to give him kudos for that. And you got to say, wow. Now, do we want him to continue to do something like that? Absolutely not. Nobody wants to see their champion just solely box. We want to see greatness. We want to see somebody that goes for, you know, that strives for that little extra inch of greatness, which means that he's going to take chances. And those chances are out there. You got the Ortiz kid out there that stopped Bryant Jennings. You still got Deontay Wilder, who's a big, strong right-handed American puncher. There are viable opponents out there for him to show greatness. So those things we got to sit back. But the rematch is looming with Vladimir Klitschko. What happens? Do we continue from round 13 and it goes on the way it started from round 1? Or do we see not a more mature Tyson, but an arrogant Tyson that says, well, it was easy the first time, it's going to be easy the second time? I don't know. That's what makes that rematch interesting. But at the same time, it's not too interesting because we have to sit back and be realistic. Vladimir Klitschko is no longer Vladimir of the past. This is the future Klitschko. And that's a one-handed fighter, can't pull the trigger anymore. And he just needs to kind of ride into the sunset and hang him up. I don't know what else he wants to prove. He lost. I don't think anybody would be upset if he just didn't come back, if he said, I retire. I think he has enough money, and I think he's collected enough bouts to sit back and say that he is in the history books of boxing as one of the great heavyweight champions to reign and to keep hostage those titles, not because he didn't want to face somebody, because how dominant he was against up-and-comers and the guys that were there in his division for him to take out.
Well, the latest news is Klitschko Fury 2 has been signed. The news has come through today.
There you go. So, biggest money out there for, you know, you can't blame the guys. Money talks.
Yes.
You know, and obviously the fans of Klitschko's felt like he didn't want to fight. He ran around the ring. He held when he got close. He pity-pat. He didn't stay on, you know, he didn't put his foot on the ground to try to land big punches. He just wanted to pity-pat and walk out. Pity-pat, walk out. So the Klitschko fans got something to argue about. The Fury fans, well, their argument's going to be, well, Tyson's just got to do what he did for the first 12 rounds. You know, it's always hard, in my opinion, watching. If you go back and watch all the rematches of every fight, it's very rare. I think there's only a handful where you could say the rematches were the best and blah blah blah. But it's really rare that you see a rematch that it's going to bring it on. I mean, there's not a lot. There probably could be a little bit more punches. It's going to be far better than the first one because there wasn't very much punches thrown. But what we saw of Klitschko was a guy that honestly almost looked like he needed a cane to hold up his left hand. His left jab was not even there. He was handicapped. So that being said, what happens if his left jab doesn't come out again? What other part of his body becomes handicapped? So do we see a replica of the first one, or do we see a rejuvenized Vladimir Klitschko against a young, hungry Tyson Fury? That's the Father Time he's got to jump over, across. He's got to knock out Father Time before he can get a Tyson Fury. And I just don't think he can do that anymore. The display of what we've seen with him with Jennings to the display that we saw with Tyson Fury, you obviously got to say, by the months and days and hours and minutes being counted down, that's age winning. Age is winning by every second.
See, I actually picked Jennings to beat Klitschko that night. I really thought
a lot of people
could beat him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because Jennings didn't take as many chances. People said, "Oh, Jennings will get knocked out. He'll get knocked out in a couple rounds." I said, "No, I think he'll be around there. I think he's got a long reach. I think he'll use the jab. I think he'll get on the inside. I think he'll do some damage. I think in the later rounds he might step on the gas and take Klitschko out of there because I think he'll be brave enough to throw punches." But somewhere in that fight, I don't know if Brian said to himself, "You know what? I'm getting clipped with his big right hand. I don't want to get knocked out. I'll go to 12 rounds. And hey, if I get beat on 12 rounds, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because, I went 12 rounds for Klitschko. As opposed to, I went out there trying to fight Klitschko and get caught and got knocked out."
Right.
That I think may have gone through his mind. The other thing was experience.
Yeah.
Seizing the moment. Because there were a few times he caught Klitschko, but he couldn't, jump on that situation. And of course, when you're stepping up in class, now, the situations where you get somebody hurt and you have a possibility to finish somebody or hurt somebody, they are less because of the class of the individual you're fighting. When you're lower level and you hurt somebody, well, you can just go in there and throw your fit and finish off.
Right.
Now you hit a guy with a shot, bang, that guy may move to left or move to right or throw a jab back or hit you with a right hand. It's something you have to think about.
Right.
So, but then again, when I go back to the Pulev fight, I picked Pulev to beat Klitschko too. I thought Pulev's jab was going to be a key. I thought he was a big puncher. And then, first round, he rocks Klitschko with the left jab. And then Klitschko drops him. And I have to say, that was the best Klitschko knockout. I was like, wow. I'm interested in seeing Klitschko fight again. But then, smooth forward to 2015, we had Canvas Gate. And the whole 3 layers of canvas and the sponge. And then you go back to Pulev and you ask yourself the question, Kubrat Pulev is the guy that can move in and out all the time. In this particular fight of Klitschko, he stood in the pocket. He wasn't moving anywhere. His feet were like lead. He was stuck in quicksand. I'm thinking, did they use that same canvas for Pulev that they tried to use with Tyson Fury? If so, how many other fights? Then I go back and think about Vitaly Klitschko when he fought Orlando Solis. First round, Solis was doing okay, then twisted his ankle. And I'm thinking, is this the same canvas?
I have to go back and look at that. You know?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, though?
It makes you wonder, but I mean, look, like I said, fall time, what's the first thing you notice when somebody starts getting older? Legs. You know, they're not as mobile. But then again, both of the Klitschkos have never had to be very mobile because of their wingspan. They're so long, you know? So they had that advantage. In so many ways, Tyson Fury, if it was a shorter guy that got in there that wasn't Tyson Fury, there was a strong possibility Klitschko would still be holding on to his belt. But there was a lot of variables that were against Klitschko in this fight. His age, his legs, his jab, Tyson Fury's height, Tyson Fury's being very awkward, Tyson Fury having some hand speed. And the other thing that Klitschko wasn't able to utilize that he's done for years is to really rest his overhand left and body over the neck of his opponents. And that was one of the tasks he used to use to wear you down. If you were quick-footed, if you were a boxer, he knew how to tie you up and just put his weight on you. Absolutely. Couldn't really do that with Tyson Fury unless Tyson allowed him to do it. And you saw it get done here and there when Tyson Fury allowed him to do that. So Tyson really kind of eliminated all the little extra stuff that we were able to see from Klitschko, and make it kind of nullify it, which not only did it puzzle Klitschko, but at the same time, it puzzled the old Klitschko. You know, where I think a younger Vladimir Klitschko would have just let his hands go, would have tried to just went in to try to rough him up a bit more, and probably risked the chance of gassing himself out where he could have got knocked out. That was the reckless Klitschko. The new Klitschko, the one that Emmanuel Stewart had branded and worked with, was strategically a guy that knew how to systematically break you down with his abilities, with the gifts that he obtained, the height, the wingspan, the jab, the straight right. And that, a lot of ways, was being diminished by the time and the ages. If you watch that, it slowly was just kind of disappearing, you know. And let
me throw this at you: the Jonathan Banks effect. I mean, you're trust. Whenever you're with somebody that got you out of the pit of fire, and that's where Vladimir Klitschko was at one time. Yeah. He was a guy that should have been one of the biggest, greatest heavyweights out there, but was being knocked out. And no one really wanted to work with him. He was kind of being he was kind of at the edge of the earth already, right? Got in with Emmanuel Stewart, and he was able to rebirth his image and his career. I think Jonathan Bank has done a great job. I mean, he told him all the right things when he was in there with Tyson Fury. He said, let your hands go. You got to let them go. If it was Emmanuel Stewart, would we have seen something different? I don't know, because like I said, you're not fighting against the best opponent that you've ever faced in your career, but you're fighting a younger opponent, for one, and secondly, you're fighting Father Time. When you see a guy that just can't let go, bro, he's done. That's it. Your mind is telling you everything, and you could see it in his eyes. He was like, I have him. You know, he was able to see the target. Tyson Fury, as good as a boxing display he was giving, still was making some very amateur flaws that could have been capitalized by Vladimir Klitschko. But it was Klitschko's job to capitalize that. And unfortunately, his hands couldn't respond fast enough when his brain told him, let your hand go. So that's the biggest question in this rematch. Are we going to finally say he's a done fighter? Is he an old fighter? And that's going to make up just going to answer most of the questions that we have. The other one is Tyson Fury, did he have a lucky night? We'll find out on that rematch. Can Tyson Fury do more than what he did in the first time around? We're going to find out on that rematch. You know, Jonathan Banks, can he make the adjustments? Can he make the adjustments of an old fighter to let his hands go? Can he trick him into throwing more than 1-2 punches every 1 minute in the round? Those are very difficult obstacles, not impossible obstacles, because it's boxing. Okay, it only needs one punch to turn a fight around. But those are certainly some very high depth obstacles to hurdle over. And those are the questions that are going to be answered in the rematch. Okay, moving away from Klitschko Fury, let's talk about, 2015. Any fights that stick out in your mind?
Any fights that stick out in my mind?
Apart from Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather, of course.
Actually, that's in the far back of my mind. Let me see. Any fights that really stick out of my mind? God, that's the sad part about 2015. It's a lot like 2014. I mean, can you really think of a really good fight that happened in 2014 that really stood out without really thinking about it? 2015 is probably even worse. It's a worse of a year for fight fans. Because of the separation in the playground between promoters not willing to play in the sandbox, have kind of left us wishful thinking, that certain fights can be put together. The fights that were put together that we thought that were going to be explosive actually ended up to be duds. Klitschko, Golovkin versus Lemieux.
Okay, that was one.
That one didn't deliver as much as the hype was surrounded with them, and even between the talks between. Lemieux was ready to fight. He wanted a street fight because he knew that was the only way he had a chance of even getting anywhere with Golovkin. Golovkin was telling us this is going to be a street fight. I'm going to take it back to the way it was when the very first pay-per-views came around, when Hagler and Hearns and blah, 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 et cetera, right? And it didn't deliver that. He ended up delivering a boxing display. So we didn't get that thirst that we were craving, what I was craving. The next one up was Canelo Alvarez versus Miguel Cotto. The big rivalry between two countries, great countries, Mexico and Puerto Rico. They went in, and it really felt like it was just another fight happening. Both guys didn't go for it. Canelo was obviously, size-wise, was the much bigger man, and every time he had Cotto hurt, what did he do? He backed off. His corner even told him, don't take risks. That, to me, was not the real true Mexican mentality. Mexican warrior, once they know they have their bull hurt, they pull out the sword and take the bull down. He didn't do that. Instead, they were worrying about the brand of Canelo. And I don't know if that's going to help the sport of boxing or definitely develop a superstar among the hardcore fight fans, but it left the appetite staying hungry. I was still very hungry for some more carnage. I'm a meat and potato guy, man. You don't bring me a thin steak. You bring me a big, thick, juicy steak. And I didn't get that with Canelo and Cotto at all. So, yeah, not a lot of fights really stood out there. Keith Thurman had his fight with Robert Guerrero, which was a very solid fight. But it doesn't tell us where Keith is really at. He was voted.
What about the Collazo fight? Did that tell us anything about Keith Thurman? He called Collazo, and I'm a big fan of Thurman, called Collazo over the hill, and Collazo almost took him out of there. And then what was weird was had the best round of the fight for him, and decided to retire the next round. I'm like,
I hate to say this, and a lot of folks say I'm very controversial or what things that I say or my opinion, but these are my opinions. I get a lot of emails going, Dave, do you think fights are still fixed? I said, absolutely, they're still fixed. And they're just fixed in different ways, okay? Like, for instance, when you have Peter Quillen that shrugged off a large amount of money the very first time offered a big purse by Al Heyman, that's a fix because Al Heyman's interrupting the chance of this fighter making some real money and moving forward with his career. When you see a fighter that's a marquee fighter that is the banner, the face for the banner of the promotional group getting soft opponents that they're supposed to get through, those are fixed fights. So things are definitely fixed in different ways. Could Collazo have sat down back on that seat because he was promised more fights or more money down the road? Because the fact that Keith Thurman he's a poster boy for PBC, that's a strong possibility. I cannot say that no, that couldn't happen because it's this day of era. There's still the sport of boxing is very corrupted. If you don't think that otherwise, what sport are you watching?
Exactly.
But going back with Keith Thurman, it tells you the agenda of PBC, of what they're trying to do with their fighters, which, if you want to be an objective person, you look at the overall of what they're doing, and you're able to break it apart and say, is this good for the sport? But if you want to look at it just one way, at one side of the coin, they're absolutely doing what they're supposed to do for their fighters, which is make them money and make them into a household name. And the PBC and Al Heyman people are obviously, they're doing that. They're upholding their contract to their fighter, right? But that relationship between them, they're missing the third party. The threesome. The threesome, which is us, the fight fans. The people that actually pay to watch these fights. The people that go and buy tickets. The people that get on YouTube or podcasts to hear about their fighter or hear an interview that their fighter is conducting. To go to a open media workout, all those things, all those extra things that help function an event and help function the money's going to a fighter's pocket is really being cut out. Al Haymon has figured out a way of keeping the fat of the steak and cutting out the meat. And fighters are okay with that because they're getting exactly what they've asked for. Get paid, get exposure, and live like a king. That is something they're doing. I mean, let's go back at their 2015 review. They gave Keith Thurman Fighter of the Year. Based on what, bro? What did he do? I don't understand. You fought Guerrero, Collazo. What else has he done? What can we stay there in significance of saying he's Fighter of the Year? Or Danny Garcia.
Done a lot of talking and suddenly gone quiet. Just went missing.
Yeah, he just went missing. So I don't understand that. And that's just the brand of how I used to call Floyd Mayweather the Houdini of boxing. Okay. Now you could say that where he learned that method of magic is from Al Haymon, because Al Haymon is the Houdini of boxing, and he has fooled a lot of people in believing there are some great fights out there by PBC, that Danny Garcia is the it factor, that Danny Jacobs and Peter Quillin was the fight we all wanted to see. Come on, man. Those are the fights that are only available because they're all in the same camp. There's no strive to greatness in these promotional groups. Don't ever question a fighter's heart, but you certainly question a promoter's heart and wallet. And it's the obvious. It's right there. It's slapping us in the face. They're not even doing this in the dark anymore, brother. Back in the 1920s, even before that, in the 1800s, in the Queenbridge, they would do everything out in the shed, away from the cops, in the dark, at midnight, where all the crooks come out. Now, they do it in broad daylight. They're no longer vampires.
There's expressions, at least Jack Ripper wore a mask.
Exactly. Exactly. These guys have no shame about it, and
what doesn't make things any easier, Dave, is that we've got boxing media that is reporting and kissing the asses of people like PBC and other promoters around the world that would lead you to believe that if their fighter hits anybody in the world, they'll all get knocked out, which we all know is not true, because boxing history tells us that eventually you meet a guy you can't knock out. Tyson had it, Foreman had it. All the big punchers in history have met somebody that they could not knock out. And,
I wouldn't blame the boxing media, because first off, that's a very small selection of folks out there that actually do reporting. But I think we should call them with the obvious of what they are, which is they're publicists. They're not really boxing websites; they're publicist sites.
Right.
That's
true. I'm glad you said that.
And the reason why they do this is because they want that coverage. They want to be able to be next to that fighter. Look at Gennady Golovkin. Not many folks are questioning his opponents, his stance now on what weight the fight should be set at middleweight against Canelo. When in the past he had even said on my show with Abel Sanchez, 154 to 168 is not a problem. They'll fight anybody at any weight, anytime. Things change. Now, a reporter would remember that and catch on to that and say, well, wait. But you said we don't have that now because the stream of credentials that need to be dished out, they got to be accompanied by somebody. And that's accompanied by publicists. And they're very well aware of their role in the sport of boxing. Okay. They may want to tell you they're reporters, I just did, but they're well aware that they're not. They've never broken a story. They've never questioned a promoter, a manager, a strength and conditioning coach, and even a fighter. Not once have they ever done that. So until they break one of them, at least two in my book, then I can really sit there across from them and with a straight face and say, yeah, you are close to being a reporter. So I don't have no problems calling publicists. I know it pisses off a lot of folks. I know they get really upset. They choose not to communicate with me, which is perfectly fine because I don't need a publicist. I need a colleague, you know? So it is what it is. But yeah, that's definitely has hurt our sport too.
See, the thing is, there's a lot of people who are running around with cameras and quite happy to do interviews, ask all the sweet questions, all the nice questions, and get their media credentials, and you'll hear them. You go to their press conferences, and you'll see the press conferences all the time, and no, or very few, real questions are being asked at press conferences. And you're being, hold on, you're an editor, or you're a big time, you know, press man, and you're not saying anything at these press conferences? Well, you're not, you know, what shape are you in? You're the best shape of your life. House training camp. You know, nobody ever pulling out and saying, well, okay, you said this was going to be the best fight of your career. You just failed. You said this, you were at your best shape, but yet, you know, you only won 5 rounds. I mean, talk to me about it.
You know, here's the thing, and I'm not defending these guys. Again, you know, their role is to be publicists, and then I think that's not an insult if you recognize it.
Right.
You know, there's plenty of folks out there that I know personally. I wouldn't say they're my friends. I just people that I know, they're acquaintances that are publicists. They're just straight publicists. They honestly, if you even try to sit there and have a really intellectual conversation about the sport of boxing, you know exactly what level of knowledge they're at by the first couple of sentences. Okay, but to defend them when you say, why aren't they questioning these guys at press conferences and doing this and doing that? Well, I can give you 2 explanations. One is that sometimes there's the time and the place. Because a lot of times, if it is a press conference and all that, their publicist or manager do block you. They do push you out of the press room, okay? Because they don't want these questions to arise. They also don't want what you call a domino effect. Meaning that if you ask one question, the next reporter goes, whoa, that's a good question. Why didn't I think about that? Well, let me just add one word to that, right? They add to that. So the domino effect is what you have to watch out for. And that's why a lot of these guys go in there. They're not looking to get that domino effect. And they're not looking to be kicked out of that event. They you know, a lot of people travel to be at these boxing events, got a hotel, you know, very little money that they have to put the expenses on. So they're trying to live up to whatever they can, soak up every little experience they can, right? But here's the second reason why they don't do that. Because in order to be a very good interviewer, it's not something that naturally comes to you overnight. You got to do it over and over and over. I did 4 to 5 interviews, if that sometimes, a week with fighters, managers, promoters, and strength and conditioning coaches, okay? So you listen to the very beginning of Leaving in the Ring, you could hear the transition and development of technique that I took on by working with different other people that were colleagues of mine that were actual reporters and journalists, learning from them. And that's the third thing that I forgot to mention about that is the reason why these guys don't ask these questions is because they're not willing to learn. See, they already got there. They're content. Remember we talked about that comfort zone?
Yeah.
You know, this is easy. Wow, all I got to do is turn on a camera and smile and say, hey, how was training camp? There's not a lot of thought process to that. And I've always said this. You know, fight fans don't like to think too much. If you throw too much shit together, if you throw A, B, C, D, and A, you know, and you go all the way down to the alphabet, you can really seriously see them doing math in their eyes like, oh, whoa, wait a minute, whoa. This is a sport between 2 men without shirts throwing hands against each other. Why are you putting mathematical problems in the middle? A lot of fight fans that are now media, these are the same people. They don't want to mix their Pepsi with some Bacardi or Crown Royale. They just want to keep it straight. So you only get a few that I think that are willing to learn their craft, pick and choose the time and the place to throw out the real questions, and also actually do interviews. And they're okay with a few people hanging up on them. And I have more than a few people that have hung up on me, cuss me out, call me, yell at me, even to the point of telling me, I need to hear your questions before you even ask my fighter. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's the decision of whether or not, where do you want to be in your stance in this? And when the lights finally go down, who do you want to be when you go to bed? You want to be that guy that actually asks the real questions, but it's not going to have a fan base? Or the guy that is the biggest ass kisser, but he's got a huge fan base and they all call him a reporter? That's what you got to make that final decision, you know? And anybody that's worked with me know that I've always say, hey, just do your job. That's all I ask for. Do your jobs. But at the same time, check your facts. Make sure what you're about to print and what you're saying has some actual hard facts behind to back it. You know, we are an opinion-based radio, but we throw hard facts, okay? I don't go out there and just go, this guy's doing this and this guy's doing that because I feel like it, or because visually I see his physique and I'm saying, wow, wait a minute. This guy's got an extra muscle on his pinky. He's got to be on PEDs. That's not an actual fact, you know? It's just the fact of what I'm seeing, but there's no concrete evidence behind that, you know, and that entails a lot. So I don't blame folks that don't want to be journalists. They're perfectly fine being boxing publicists. But the thing that does bother me is when they do put that journalist reporter behind their name, knowing that they're not even close to being that, because they're not even willing to get dirty. Because you have to get dirty. You have to get in those trenches. You have to you don't have to, but it just comes with the territory of enemies and people that are not going to like you. You know, I get guys that try to perpetrate me, pretend they're me, to try to defame my name and you know, ruin my reputation. But that all comes with the punches that we throw out back at the corruption in the sport. People forget that we're real fight fans. We love this sport. And like any lion, he's going to protect his pride. And that's what we do. We protect our pride. And that pride is the sport of boxing and the fighters that participate because they put their lives on the line for our pure entertainment. You know, and what other gratitude can we give to them by not just shelving out our hard-earned money to watch them display this courage that they throw in the squared circle, but to identify corruption and say this is not fair and this is not right for these fighters. Now, what PBC is doing is absolutely great in terms of paying their fighters, in terms of keeping them safe. But it's criminal to steal away possibilities of legacy from them. And it's also criminal of doing what they do to us fight fans, which is don't care what we say, and they don't care whether we want to see this fight or not. They believe that they have the right to train our thoughts. And like government has found out from the past that you can't always subdue the thoughts of what we want. You can't always make us be one-track minded, because there's always going to be a few that are going to say,
not buying this.
I'm not buying this. And the more and more PBC is out, the more and more you're starting to see those little cattles, the sheeps, those bads that were out there for a very long time that were circling that barn, they're starting to leave. Now, even the fighters are starting to realize, man, I'm making good money, but at the same time, I'm losing that recognition. I'm losing that real recognition from fight fans.
Let me ask you advice on something. Been doing this a few years, not as long as you, of course, but what I've noticed, particularly with fighters, not trainers, not managers, not promoters, just fighters. You start the journey with them, they call your house, you know, they'll knock at your door, they'll even come and sit in the toilet with you. But as soon as lights, camera, action, they don't know you, they just put this. They want you to talk to a public relations officer.
The chain of command now.
That doesn't know a public relations officer that doesn't know you, doesn't know about boxing. You've got to stand now in a queue with a bunch of people that didn't back them in the first place, and when they get knocked out, we'll just be there to slate them anyway. You're in that queue. Let me ask you this: 2016, I've come to a decision that I think that if I just stick with promoters and managers and trainers, and I just interview those, and have a select few fighters that I interview, I'm going to be okay. And I'm not going to break my neck anymore to try and interview these guys that come across as pretty ungrateful. They're all nice now until they make big time, and then they forget you. And just work with the trainers who are pretty consistent. They're always going to be trainers. You know, they're always going to be in the gym doing the hard work. They're going to have the news as quick as the fighter was, or sometimes quicker than the fighter.
Right.
And there's some great characters. Abel Sanchez, Tommy Brooks, James Ali Bashir, Peter Fury, Don Charles. You can just keep going on. Fred Jenkins. You know, you just keep... The list goes on and on. And fighters and trainers. Trainers and managers and promoters to talk to. I think to myself, well, they're consistent. They're consistent. These fighters are not. And I'm not tying every fight with the same brush. But it seems to be more fighters with the same brush now. And they seem to be going down the same route. Your thoughts?
You know, here's the thing: is obviously in the beginning, when you earn the relationship with a fighter.
Yes.
And I call it earn because you have to break the barriers of gaining their trust.
Of course.
Because a lot of times, you know, everybody's looking for a handout. Okay. But the fighter's in that same position too, which is they need that publicity. They need that outlet to get their faces and their name out there to the fans that are tuning in and listening to whatever platform you've developed, right? I've learned that I don't take it personal. You know, and the reason that I don't take it personal is because these fighters are about as fragile as a 5-year-old. And what I mean by that is fighters that have made a commitment to become a prize fighter are very secluded to the real world. So they're very easily persuaded by others outside of their camp. That's why you see fighters now that have managers that have never been involved in boxing. That's why you see fighters now that have publicists that have never been a publicist for anything. They were merely their friend. So the influence level is completely different. So they're going to be influenced and they're going to listen to whoever's close to them at that moment. And I've learned that. I've learned that every fighter has that type of relationship to whoever's close to them at that moment. I don't try to be friends with any of the fighters as well as any of the promoters. If there's one promoter or one manager I am really friends with, and because I've known them for years outside of boxing, yes, there are 2 guys that I know. But other than that, I don't try to have a relationship. And the reason why I don't is because I know that barrier of trust that I had to build can easily be broken. I only trust barrier that I want with them is that one that's built that knows that you can count on Dave Duenas. I'm asking the hardest question to my fighter. Anything beyond that, I don't know him that well. But I do know he's going to ask that. And that's the level of trust and confidence I want them to have with me. I don't want it to be below, and I don't want it to be above. I want it to be right in that middle. So I get folks like, I see guys on YouTube, even on Twitter, Instagram, that call fighters that's my boy, that's my dude, and yo, what's up, bro? And and they try to make that mirage of this is really my friend, when they really don't even know that fighter. They know that fighter from one particular interview. They think now because I got the fighter's number and I can text him that we're boys. And the reality is you're not. You're just the flavor of the month. That's it. And fighters are very, very well aware of that as well. They are the flavor of the month. How many times have you seen a fighter that gets multi-praises for one thing, and as soon as he does one thing wrong, the whole world turns against him? We've seen it time and time again. So it's the world that we live in. And those are the standards that I walk into this world of news of boxing. It's just to have a peak level of trust. And that trust has to be established of what is your agenda. My agenda is to break stories or tell stories that have not been untold or don't have a voice. That's my agenda. And the people that work with me, not alongside of me, but with me, understand that trust level. That's what my agenda is about. There's nothing more. I'm not your friend. I will never be your friend. I have too many friends right now. I don't need any more to fit in my pocket.
See, it's always been about asking the questions the fans want the answers to. And to try and get I don't get spin on the channel. I don't get no spin on the channel. It's straight talking people. And that's what I'm kind of fortunate to have. And because of the years of building that relationship with those people, you get the exclusives, you get those interviews, you get them to go that little bit further than they would with other people. And for that, I'm really grateful for that. I think, you know what? These people, there's a few and far between. They've got that. They'll just say what they've got to say, and they're so articulate about what they say, and they're so honest about what they say, and they're just straight talking. They won't take any rubbish. So I don't have to feel as if I'm prying, because they're open books in the sense that they will just tell you straight as it is. And that's good. But I kind of feel it's not. It's like you've built a relationship with all these other people to be able to do that. To be, when you get to that point in time, right now, let's talk about you being champion. Let's talk about it. We've spent 2 or 3 years of you being a champ. Now you're a champ. Let's talk about it. And it's like, no, you're gonna have to go and talk to. Wait, whoa, hold on. This ain't no listen, like I said, me and you were sitting in the toilet together, that sort of thing, and then now I have to talk to your publicist. It's like, I don't get that. I don't get that, and it's only in boxing. It's only in boxing for me, because there are other things I do, and I'm still talking to those people today, and they are musicians or are artists or whatever. And
let me ask you this. Does it surprise you of why it's so easy for corruption to leak into the sport of boxing because of the characters that you deal with? It's not surprising. I mean, if you look at the way the sport is developed, the way it functions, the characters in it allow that to function like that. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had friendly relationships in the beginning of my career in journalism and boxing, where they would call me and text me and ask me, hey, can you get this out there for me? Can I get on the air? Can I get this? Once they hit a level that they were striving for, all communications are cut off. It's now, I have to protect the interest of my fighter. When before it was, no, do whatever you got to do to get your fighter out there. Now it's different. But it doesn't surprise me anymore, because everybody in boxing has their hand out. Everybody. I've not met one soul yet that doesn't have an expectation of receiving something back for something you've either done for them or haven't done for them. I've actually spoken to one manager in particular that was able to hold on to a fighter for a period of time, and nobody was giving this guy interviews. I was the only one talking to this fighter. But as soon as this fighter became an HBO guy, that manager no longer knew my name. Now, when the manager lost the fighter, because he was demoted and fired, that manager came back and knocked at my door and goes, hey, I got this other fighter. Would you mind interviewing him? And of course I did, because my agenda is to report in the sport. My agenda is not to judge your character, because my expectation is already low, because I'm involved in such a low functional sport. And I know some folks can be like, what? Low? Yes, folks. The characters that are involved in this sport, you wouldn't even let them couple footsteps in your front door. That's like allowing a thief to come in, or a bank robber to have your PIN number. Those are the kind of people you're dealing with in the sport of boxing. Sorry. You know, and the folks that are involved in the sport, if right now, whoever's listening to this and they're the ones going like this and they're involved in the sport and they're like, who are you talking about? And you can't think who I'm talking about. That's because I'm talking about you, you fool.
When you bring it home like that, you I can't argue you, man. I can't argue you. It is what it is, as they say.
So fighters are human beings. I mean, look, Peter Quillin he has lied numerous times. We caught him in lies. He lied about numerous things, and we aired it out. He came on the air trying to defend himself, but at the end of the day, he admitted to all his lies. Okay, he's not the only fighter, the first strength and conditioning coach, to the trainer, to the manager that we catch in lies. We got to remember is that even though there's a lot of people that want to idolize their fighters or the image of what they believe in their head of this fighter, they're human at the end of the day. So they're going to make very raw decisions that involves their career. Are they going to be the right decisions or the more compassionate decisions? Absolutely not. Or they wouldn't be considered human. That's why I don't take it personal. But I have to report whatever's being done in the sport. And if you ask me a fair question, I'm going to answer that question. And if I got a fair question to ask you, I only hope that you answer me. That's the way it should be. That's the only kind of relationship I want with anybody, you know? And you know what's, it's like in a marriage, right, brother? You're married. You know what I'm talking about. It's like in a marriage, you know, there's got to be trust. And there's got to be that open door at all times, 24/7, for me to allow me to ask you anything I want, whether it's judgmental or whether it's jealousy based or whether it's just out of curiosity. Honey, where were you all day today? Babe, I called you twice. Why didn't you answer the phone? Right? That's the expectations we should have in the sport of boxing. When we ask fighters, promoters, and managers a fair question. One is, why are you working with Memo Heredia when you know the history and the past of that man? And what has he done to cleanse it or clear it? To make us feel comfortable that he's now involved with a clean sport. Why, Lou DiBella, are you still backing up Jermaine Taylor when he was fighting, when he knew he had mental problems, when he was not signed off on a healthy bill? When you had said at one time, you're walking away because you're too good of a friend of mine. Why is those hard questions? Why is it a hard question to ask the WBC to enforce their rules under their belt, under their law guidelines, and for them not wanting to answer any of those questions? So those are the revolving door that I'm wondering. Those are things that I want, and that's why I say, you know, I understand your frustration. I understand that when somebody gets to a certain point, those doors are closed. But that's just the sport of boxing. That's what I'm always being told. It's boxing, Dave. It's boxing. I don't know what that really means, but it's got me saying it now. It's boxing.
But they say they've got two things. If you want loyalty, buy a dog. That's the first thing I've been told. But the second thing I've been told is there are very few good people in boxing. The rest of them, well, that's it really.
I wouldn't say they're not good people. I mean, look, I believe that everybody in the world that have goodness in them, it's the agenda they have when they step foot out the door. What is that agenda? You know, is it a good agenda? Is it a selfish agenda? I wouldn't say it's a bad agenda, what they seek for, but I believe it is a selfish agenda. Because that cookie jar that is sitting right there on the table of boxing is not even well protected. They've made laws for ways you can't make money or hustle in the sport of boxing under the Ali Act, but that Ali Act has so many holes you could look at it like Swiss cheese and put it in your sandwich and eat it. So that cookie jar is not guarded. And that's what the agenda is are you a good guy with an agenda of doing good things with your agenda in the sport of boxing? Or are you a selfish guy only to do selfish things with your agenda, meaning that only to lace your pocket full of gold and screw the rest? Because there's no way to regulate how many hands are going into that cookie jar. There is just no way. You don't even know. I mean, we could sit here right now and look at all the faces and hands involved in the sport of boxing. And even in one promoter. And I can guarantee you'll miss 3 or 4 guys you would say, oh, I didn't know he was getting paid to work with this event.
You're right.
It's scary. If you really sit there and you wonder why the most unlawfulness people get involved in the sport of boxing, because it's a haven for them. What? There's no cops looking at what we're going to do next? There's nobody here to regulate me? That's like putting 5 classes of kindergartens together with no teacher supervision, no principal there, and then give them a bunch of paint and say finger paint, just the walls. You really think that they're going to follow that? Absolutely not. Let's not forget that laws are made to regulate men. And when there's no laws, all we have is chaos.
Don King once said, you don't get what you want in this world, you get what you negotiate.
Absolutely. And when the negotiating table was so open and freely like the Wild West, what did they do? What did they do to negotiate?
What did they do? Tell me.
They either hung you or shot you.
Oh, great.
And that is the plain way things are done in boxing. I hate to say it. You know, I could sit here for days and give you the vast dark side of the sport. Even stuff that I haven't even brought up in my show or in an article, or that's just I've been sitting on stories that could honestly make you go, holy smokes. I couldn't believe that was possible. When a movie called like Creed comes out and everybody's going, that was a good story. One of the best Rocky stories of the new generation. It's a good story. It was an okay story. And it was an okay story for me because the fact is there's so many great triumphing stories in boxing. So many of them. If you bother to walk into a gym and hear somebody out and hear their background, whether they're Latino, white, European, black, Asian, everybody comes to the connection of boxing from a story. Some more hardships more than others. And that's what I think that what really draws me to the sport is to see still that there are still people believing the Cinderella story in boxing, which is they're going to get that glass slipper. That's very intriguing to me still. That's very heartwarming to me to see that story still lives among a lot of international folks around this world that believe in something. Boxing is the lottery for fighters. They don't play the numbers. They play by the punches. And that's a great story.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've got some great stories there. I'm sure. Let's talk about the most overrated fighter in 2015 for you.
Ooh, the most overrated fighter. Peter Quillin. Most overrated. I think most overrated by talks of everybody. Well, here's the thing. Did we think Danny Jacobs was going to do what he was going to do to Peter Quillin? Absolutely not. No, I didn't. Did I want it to happen? Oh, yes, I did. I definitely wanted that train to be derailed off the tracks. But Peter Quillin was vastly being promoted by PBC as their next big middleweight champion. Okay, the guy that was the crossover star, right? That's what you would want to call it. But he hadn't done anything. He had drew a draw with Andy Lee, who Andy Lee is if you want to talk about Cinderella stories, he's the Cinderella man of the 2000. Guy will be able to turn around a fight with a punch. But Quinlan really hadn't done anything after that. Every fight that he had that was actually somewhat entertaining was always on the brink of him possibly losing. So him getting in with Danny Jacobs, and Danny Jacobs being a much smarter and more seasoned fighter than Peter, was able to look at that, capitalize it, and move forward and become the champion that he is right now, the crown champion of one of the bouts as a middleweight. So I think Peter Quinlan is the prime example of promoters nowadays, such as PBC, that don't know how to promote a fighter yet or develop them. They don't know how to develop them. They know how to label them, but they don't know how to develop them. And that's probably a process they have to learn if they're around long enough to learn that process. The promoters that are old, like Top Rank, there's a reason why they've been around for years and years and years. It's because they know that you don't rush a good thing. You develop it. Golden Boy's learning that as well. They haven't caught up to speed just yet because they also have that problem of labeling a fighter before they become stardom, such as Canelo Alvarez. I don't think Canelo Alvarez is what he's really out to be yet. Is he still learning? He's still young, yeah. But do you really think that he's going to get any better at what you've seen so far?
Absolutely not.
I don't think so. I think the peak. Now. Yeah, I think that's his peak. So a fighter like Canelo is not. In order to achieve greatness with a fighter like Canelo, the greatness is really behind the curtains. Yeah. Because we've seen great fighters that didn't do great things, but became great fighters because of their team. Mm-hmm. Okay? It's a lot of ways boxing is just like the music industry. You always wonder when that one guy was like, how did that guy become or able to sell records? And he doesn't have any talent. It's the guys behind him. The songwriter, the producer, the manager, the label, the money man. And that's what right now Canelo is. He's an artist that doesn't really have that full potential. But if you give him a good song to sing on and good track, a good producer, he's going to go far. Yeah. He's going to go far. And he is. And he's showing that.
He's got the Hollywood looks.
Right. He got the Hollywood looks. He's a Mexican kid that looks Irish. Yeah. I'm not saying he can't box. He could box. Yeah. But is he in the category of what they want him to be at, the Salvador Sanchez?
You think they're trying to make him like a Oscar De La Hoya? They're trying to go that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, because see, the model of Oscar De La Hoya was successful. So you just try to mimic it. I mean, it's just like the UFC. When the UFC was developed, they used the model of boxing, but they perfected it in certain ways. Right? Yeah. To become successful. Because you don't break away from a success story. You implicate it.
You build on it.
Yeah. So that's exactly what Golden Boy are doing. But they're missing the key elements of developing the Golden Boy again. Which is, you got to have a great story, one. And a great story has to have great talent. And that great talent has to be developed carefully. You can't just put a puzzle all together really quick and not double check it. And that's what they're doing. They put a puzzle all together and now they're just banking on it. They're hoping that star upholds to greatness. Because I'd say the only way that Canelo reaches that plateau of greatness that they're looking for is the man behind the curtains, which is the matchmakers. Matchmaking this guy correctly every time out. When he fought Curlin, that was a great matchup. It was a facade of he had power. He knocked out a chinny fighter. Okay? When he beat Miguel Cotto, he beat a seasoned, but not a real middleweight fighter. And let's not forget, he's an older fighter on his way out already. So, as long as they keep matching them correctly, I think they're going to reach where they want to go. But it's never going to be greatness. There's always going to be questions.
Think he fights Gennady Golovkin?
I think he does. I don't think it's going to be right away. Golden Boy, in a lot of ways, Golden Boy is still a prospect of promoters. They're learning on the job. and they learned hard with David Lemieux. You know, that was a terrible move by their part, putting in David Lemieux that wasn't even fully developed yet, wasn't even able to be comfortable yet as a champion, to even have that confidence as a champion, to defend it against another guy that was hungry like him. Didn't have that chance. So they made that mistake, thinking that, hey, let me tell you, two things happened. One is they needed the money. Golden Boy need that money with David Lemieux. They needed that money, okay? Because Canelo's promoter is still suing Canelo and Golden Boy, okay? And then secondly, Golden Boy got greedy. They looked at it, well, if David Lemieux wins against Gennady, we can make a mega showdown, in-house fight between Lemieux and Canelo. And it blew up in their face. So now it's all about a strategic agenda. How do they now keep that pocket of gold on their side of the rainbow and orchestrate it to benefit them when they get in the ring with Gennady Golovkin? And patience. That's the key thing in boxing. Fight fans are very impatient. We want fights tomorrow. And promoters got to learn how to give us appetites. Mm-hmm. That makes us go like, oh, okay, now this is the time to make this fight happen. And Top Rank has always been great about doing that. Always been great about how to feed us appetizers here and there. So,
Manny Pacquiao. I see shades of when De La Hoya met Pacquiao happening to Pacquiao's career now, for whoever he's going to be for the sacrificial lamb. First, I'm thinking that he's going to be sacrificial lamb for Terence Crawford. In-house. What do you think?
Well, you know, the difference with Pacquiao was when Oscar was fading because he wasn't consistent and he had a drug problem. Okay? And he wasn't a serious fighter in the later of his career. You know, I think when he started Golden Boy Promotions, you got to remember he signed I forgot how many. I think it was a 5-7 fight deal with HBO.
Right.
You know, he basically had to make sure that he was not only involved in the promotional part, but still being the cash cow for the banner. Right. Where Pacquiao still is able just to think as a fighter. Right. Sure, he's a congressman. But he's learned how to balance that, and he doesn't have to worry about if he has to bring a paycheck to the promotion, because the promoter already has their hands in other fighters in developing them and making money, right? So it's not really weighing on the shoulder of Pacquiao. So they're not really in the same position where Oscar he had a fight to really get his company off the ground. He had to continue to fight rather than retire. Pacquiao's a little different still. So, Terence Crawford, is he a good fighter? Absolutely. On paper, does he look like he's the guy that should beat Pacquiao next? Yeah. But he's not fighting a guy that's completely done with the sport. He's actually going to fight a guy that still wants to be involved in the sport. Still is hungry to show that he's the best. So, there's three phases of a fighter's career, and we all know this. So you're a fight fan, you watch for many years. The first stage is you're hungry to be the guy. The second stage is, well, I'm the guy. Where do I go from here? You finally lose, and the third stage is, well, I lost, and I don't want to be remembered as the guy that lost. I want to be remembered as the guy that won on top. And that's where Pacquiao's at. So, does every story like that end with a happy ending? Absolutely not. As we saw with Roy Jones Jr., once again getting knocked out again, that new achievement is not that forgiving. And it's not that easy to get. It's far more difficult when you're a prime fighter fighting for that goal. So, Terence Crawford's going to be the judge in this in this fight if they fight. He's going to be the judge. Is Pacquiao done for good, or does Pacquiao have one more great fight left in him to leave on top? We'll find out.
Now, please give me some hope. I know you're probably going to smash me for saying this, but I'm very much a retro man, so forgive me for my retro dribble. Here it comes. Ike Ikeabuchi. Do you remember those nights?
Yeah.
With Chris Bird, with David Tua.
Yep.
With David Eisen, if I'm right.
Yes.
Those nights. You can see them now, can't you?
Oh, absolutely.
And he's 43 years old now.
43, was in prison. We know we covered his release.
Right.
Brian Fogg was able to interview his ex-manager. And let's just say this is the president.
Yes.
He has no business in boxing anymore. Even making his comeback. I mean, this is the thing. 43 years old. Let's take that away. Let's just take that out of the.
I really don't want to hear it.
Psychology. He's not all up there. Okay. He never was. Okay, and that's just the crazy thing about boxing is that we're the only sport that's willing to embrace somebody that went away from prison for years and years and years. Somebody that has psych problems. We're the only ones in the sport that's willing to embrace a criminal, not show them off. We actually will provide shelter. We're the dumbest sport that's willing to say, oh, so you almost killed somebody. Yeah, come on, Ben. Don't worry about it, Block. Just walk right through the door. Matter of fact, that's okay. Don't leave the knife and gun there. It's going to get wet and cold outside. Bring it inside. We're the only sport to do shit like that. It makes no sense.
Yes, I agree, and I knew it was coming, but it's Ike Ikeabuchi. I've got this soft spot for Ike Ikeabuchi.
Yeah, I got a soft spot for all the fighters of the past, from Michael Carbajal to Johnny Tapia.
Yes.
You know, Tommy Morrison, rest in peace.
Oh.
All these guys. But the place where I want to remember them is a good place.
Uh-oh.
You know what I'm saying? It's a good place.
So is there any hope? I know. Is there any hope that the president could just get a couple of fights together, keep his head together, and just do something foreman-like and maybe win a version of the world title?
Well,
I know.
I don't even know. Look, this is the thing. This is boxing. Like I said, we're the only sport that's willing to embrace a criminal. The only sport that's willing to embrace such scenarios like this. Okay,
right.
To even flirt with these type of scenarios.
Right.
So is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Because there's somebody out there that's a promoter manager that looks at dollar signs and is going to say, "Hey, I can get him a couple of fights." You know, I mean, they were trying to get Riddick Bowe back in. I mean, Riddick Bowe was trying to get back into the sport.
No.
Shannon Briggs is obviously a vital threat to anybody in the heavyweight division still, because he knows how to publicize himself. So is it impossible? Absolutely not. It is not impossible. It's how you lay the chips. And that's what the president's got to find out. How does he lay the chips? Is he going to be sane enough to lay these chips to allow this to happen is the question. Is that going to be possible? Is he sane enough to understand that somebody's trying to maneuver things for him to get him back in that limelight?
He's 15 years been in prison. Surely the man would have seen some sense.
Exactly. But
surely.
But
I mean, we hope.
Yeah. Now that's something. See, but that's in reality. Hope in reality is a lot different than hope in boxing.
I don't even know why I have this sense. It's because I thought back in the day, Ike Ikeabuchi was going to be the best of them all. That's what I thought. Oh, I think you weren't alone. You weren't alone. Everybody thought that. I mean, you saw a display of greatness with this guy in a very small amount of time that he was televised.
And he couldn't even grasp that. You know, he wanted to rape a woman and didn't understand what the big deal was about, because he did it in Nigeria, I believe, right? Yeah. You know, he was like, well, I did that there. What was the problem me doing it here? Oh. He didn't understand that. Couldn't separate those two worlds. You know? And boxing is the only sport that allows the beast to come out and to be praised. We praise the carnage of the man, the monster in the man, when he steps in the ring. But it's the fighter's job to know how to put that monster back into the cage.
How does he do?
How does he do it?
If you're going to flick a coin, how does he do? In all honesty, seriousness now, how does he do?
The gamble is always going to be is whether or not he's willing to go through serious help. But that's going to take time and years. And like I said, the agenda of people in the sport of boxing are numerous. And the ones that are going to be attracted are the ones that have the selfish agenda, which is make as fast as money as you can with this guy because he only has a year or two before people start looking at it as a joke. So the hopes of him being sane for a brief time is a lot thinner of the hopes of how many guys are going to take advantage of this poor dude and use his name. There's more realism to that than to him ever reaching the pinnacle of where he was once at one time or was expected, especially in this sport.
Dave Duenas, thank you so much for talking to Bayloric TV. We really enjoyed having you, and we could talk for ages.
Thank you, man. It's always fun coming on. I apologize about the lighting. We just moved in, so, you know, I'm still moving things here at this new house that we have here and stuff. But, man, it's always fun. You know, I haven't talked to anybody really at a length about the sport. And it's always refreshing to find that there's other guys out there that want to talk about boxing and actually the sport of boxing. Not just the little trends that have happened, the hashtags of the sport, but the real meat and grind of it. And every time you have me on, I swear you leave me wanting to stay on more and definitely talk myself out of breath when it comes to talking boxing with you. So I appreciate it, man. I really do. We got to do it again really soon. Not wait for the whole year to pass us by to get back on the air with each other, you know?
Fantastic, Dave. Well, I'm around. You know where I am. I know where you are. Let's do it.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you again, man.
Take care, champ. All the best.